Your life is every level of black market arms dealer.
You've never fired a gun in your life. Not once. No military service, no hunting trips, no Saturday afternoons at the range. You're a logistics consultant from Columbus, Ohio, who's good at paperwork, better at math, and excellent at not asking questions that don't need asking. The man who finds you isn't what you'd expect. He's 5'0" something, drives a Volvo, wears sensible shoes. He gets your name through a former colleague who did creative bookkeeping for cash-heavy businesses. He has a problem, he explains over lunch, at an unremarkable Italian restaurant. He moves products internationally, legally complicated products, shipping manifests, customs declarations, end-user certificates. He needs someone who understands bureaucracy the way a surgeon understands the body. He never says the word guns. Not once. You don't ask. The first payment is $11,000 wired to an LLC you set up in Delaware. Consulting fees. Legitimate on paper. That's the thing about this world. Everything is legitimate on paper, right up until it isn't. You go home that night and make dinner and watch television and sleep fine. That's the part that should scare you. It doesn't. The end user certificate is a piece of paper that says a weapon is going to a specific buyer in a specific country for a specific legitimate purpose. Governments require them, customs officials stamp them. They're also extremely easy to falsify if you know what you're doing. Your job is knowing what you're doing. You spend 6 weeks studying the documentation architecture of 5 different countries' arms import regulations. You learn which officials sign off on which forms. You learn which third-party verification companies ask the fewest questions. You learn that the international arms trade runs on paperwork, the way a hospital runs on forms, endless, bureaucratic, and largely unread. The first shipment you process exists only on paper. 200 surplus rifles moving from Eastern Europe to what the documents describe as a private security contractor in West Africa. You don't know if that's true. You don't investigate. You process the documentation, route the payment through 3 shell companies, and receive $18,000 for 2 weeks of work. You are not a criminal yet. That's what you tell yourself. You're a consultant. You do paperwork. What happens to the cargo after it clears customs is not your department. 6 months in, the Volvo Man introduces you to the actual business. You're in a hotel conference room in Vienna. 4 men, 3 languages, 1 translator earning his fee. On the table, a product catalogue. Military-grade equipment. Small arms, ammunition, some heavier hardware you don't have language for yet. The buyers represent a government that officially has no relationship with the sellers. That's why you're here. To build the bridge that officially doesn't exist. You watch the negotiation and understand for the first time what you actually are. You're not a logistics consultant. You're the reason a weapons shipment can cross 8 international borders and arrive looking like agricultural equipment. You are the infrastructure. Without people like you, the cargo sits in a warehouse. With you, it moves. The deal closes at $4.2 million. Your cut is $140,000. On the flight home, you read a magazine article about a conflict in the region where the shipment is headed. Civilian casualties, displaced families, children photographed in refugee camps. You turn the page, you have a mortgage, 2 kids, a daughter starting college in 2 years. You turn the page. By year 3, you're not processing other people's deals. You're running your own. You have a network, suppliers across the former Soviet bloc who have surplus military equipment and complicated relationships with their own governments. Buyers across 3 continents who need weapons and can't acquire them through official channels, governments under sanctions, rebel factions with resource wealth but no diplomatic recognition, private contractors operating in places where operating officially is inconvenient. You know their needs before they call. You've built a reputation for reliability and discretion. In this market, those qualities are worth more than price. Your operation is invisible by design. You exist across 7 shell companies in 4 jurisdictions. Your communications run through encrypted channels that rotate weekly. You haven't met a client in person in 8 months. Everyone knows pieces. Nobody knows the whole picture. You net $2.3 million in year 3. You buy a house in Portugal under a name that is technically yours but practically isn't. You tell your wife it's an investment property. She stopped asking detailed questions because the answers make her uncomfortable and the lifestyle doesn't. You've crossed a line, you can't identify exactly when you crossed it, but you know you're on the other side. By year 5, you understand the true shape of what you've built. Suppliers, logistics chains, documentation specialists, and financial operators across 12 countries. A lawyer in Luxembourg who asks nothing and charges everything. A banker in Cyprus who treats your deposits with the particular courtesy reserved for clients whose paperwork wouldn't survive scrutiny. You don't move weapons anymore. You design the systems that move them and collect a percentage of everything that flows through. 2 shipments you brokered ended up in a conflict that international journalists are now calling a war crime. You read the reports carefully. Your name appears nowhere. Your companies appear nowhere. The paper trail dead ends in a trading company registered in the British Virgin Islands, dissolved 3 weeks after the transaction closed. You're good at this. Being good at this is what keeps you awake at 3 a.m. You have a rule you've never said out loud. You don't ask what happens after delivery. Don't track the conflicts. Don't count the casualties. The weapon is inert steel and polymer until someone makes a decision you have no control over. You're just the infrastructure. The infrastructure that makes the decision possible. You don't follow that thought to its conclusion. There's a specific kind of person this work attracts, and you've met most of them by now. Former military logistics officers with useful contacts and flexible ethics. Disgraced diplomats who still have relationships. Governments officially pretend don't exist. Accountants, bankers, shipping executives, ordinary professionals in extraordinary arrangements. None of them look like what they are. That's the whole point. Danger announces itself, infrastructure doesn't. You attend a conference in Dubai. Legitimate defense industry. Contractors, procurement officials, manufacturers. Half the people in the room are doing exactly what you're doing, just with better paperwork and government contracts thin enough to call legal. The line between arms dealer and defense consultant is largely a question of which government is signing the purchase order. You understand this now with a clarity that took 5 years to develop. The business runs itself for 3 weeks while you're traveling. That's when you know you've built something real. Not a side arrangement, not a consulting practice, a machine. In year 6, a shipment gets intercepted. Not yours specifically. A network 2 degrees removed from yours. A European customs operation, months of surveillance, a cooperative informant somewhere in the chain, 14 arrests across 4 countries. The news calls it a major victory against international arms trafficking. You watch the coverage and recognise 2 names. Neither knows enough to reach you directly. But networks are connected, and investigators follow connections. You spend $200,000 on a lawyer who specialises in exactly this kind of problem. He tells you what you already know. You're not implicated yet is doing a lot of work in that sentence. You start moving money, liquidating positions, repositioning assets into structures harder to trace. You reduce operational activity by 60%. You wait. The investigation pivots toward bigger, more visible targets. Your network is sophisticated enough to be difficult and modest enough not to justify the resources. 6 months pass. Then a year, the heat fades. You feel nothing resembling relief. What you feel instead is something harder to name. A permanent, low-frequency alertness that never fully shuts off. You scan rooms differently now. You read news from 12 countries every morning, not out of interest, but out of operational necessity. A government falls, a supply route closes, a ceasefire collapses, demand spikes. A new sanctions regime creates new opportunities for people positioned correctly on the wrong side of it. Your world is entirely reactive, entirely contingent. You have no control over any of the variables that determine whether you stay free or don't. You've built financial security on top of a foundation that could be pulled out by a single informant, a single intercepted message, a single customs official who decides today is the day to actually read the documentation. You know this. You've known it for years. You keep going anyway, which tells you something about yourself you'd prefer not to examine. You're 51 years old and worth somewhere between $18 and $22 million, depending on asset valuations that fluctuate with the political stability of countries you've never visited. You think sometimes about the other accounting, not the financial kind. A conflict analyst whose work you follow estimated that small arms cause approximately 500,000 deaths per year globally. You've been operating for 8 years. You're one broker among dozens. Your market share, conservatively, is a fraction of a fraction. You do the math the way you do all math, precisely. Then you stop doing the math. Your daughter graduated university last spring. You flew in, sat in the audience, watched her walk across the stage, felt something real for the first time in years. She's going into international development, NGO work, post-conflict, community rebuilding. You applauded longer than anyone around you. She thinks you're in international finance. That's not entirely wrong. Some nights you consider stopping. You have enough. The risk is manageable, but permanent. You could close the structures, walk away, disappear into the investment portfolio, and live quietly on the coast in Portugal. Then a contact reaches out. Clean transaction, reliable buyer. You reply within the hour. Because here's what 8 years in this business actually teaches you. Morality is loudest before the first decision and almost completely silent after the fifth. By year 8, it's not even a whisper. It's just math, just logistics, just the next transaction in a ledger that nobody but you will ever read. The Volvo Man retired last year, southern France. He sends wine at Christmas. You drink it. The next shipment clears customs on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, you've already forgotten it existed.